Hi guys, Ashley here. Today I'm bringing you the phenomenal Michael Zakkour, the founder of 5 New Digital. Michael, great to have you on the show.
Hi, Ashley. Good to be with you.
Michael is joining us all the way from New Jersey. And of course, we're going to start this episode of Digital China, talking about all things e-commerce, all things marketing in China, consumers in China. But I think what really worries a lot of people right now is what's happening between the US and China and how is this going to impact businesses. So very quickly, Michael, what do you see happening on the US side right now? Because in China, we have a lot of anxiety as businesses are being banned. People are feeling really worried. People do not want to go to the US to study anymore. And these anxieties are just escalating month to month. What is your take on the current situation?
Yeah, no doubt that the tensions and the relations between the two superpowers are probably at a historic low at this point. We haven't seen the tension this high in 40 years. And certainly if you are in a major industry like petrochemicals, industrial, manufacturing, there's a lot to be concerned about at this point. What we've seen, even since the tariff war started about 2.5 years ago, what hasn't really been affected is the ability of consumer product companies, retailers, and brands to do business in China. So where we are seeing a lot of worries, certainly with 5G and semiconductors and anything that can be considered of national interest to both companies,
Or social media platforms.
or a social media platform, right? But in terms of the ability of U.S. companies to go and sell their products into retail to Chinese consumers, it's been pretty consistent over the last 3 years that sector has not been affected. As a matter of fact, in our business, as you know, Ashley, if anything, we've seen an uptick in the number of companies who are looking to go to China.
Why do you think they're going to China right now, post-COVID, when tensions are so high, when suddenly US decides to close consulates of China, in some places, when China will have to respond, when US is threatening to, for the first time ever, block Chinese apps operating in the market, and all that is going on. Why US companies feel confident enough to go into China, not just expand into the market, but literally go for the first time?
Yeah, I think one, brands and retailers are looking at their bottom lines for 2020 in the U.S. and Europe, and they're not liking what they see. Certainly, sales are down across the board in North America and Europe, and they're looking for a new market, new consumers for their products, and they're looking to companies like Starbucks and Nike and Apple, who already significant portions of their global sales are in China, 10%, 15%, 20%. So I think one, it's a reaction to slow demand in their home markets. Number two, China was sort of, first with COVID, but first to recover. And so they're, going where the recovery is. And number three, I think they're smart enough to see the bigger picture here. And I think look beyond the current tensions and say, this is a market that is, probably the second most important consumer market in the world after the U.S. And that's only going to go and continue to grow. And if we're going to be, really a global company, it's hard to be a global international company without including China in your mix in the long term.
Absolutely. I love how you just now said, while some strategic industries are affected right now, but consumer brands and products are not really affected. And a lot of consumers are still feeling and they have this demand to purchase. Do you think that might change as the tensions escalate towards November, perhaps? Do you think that Chinese consumers would say no to American produce? Do you feel that China might put a ban over some consumer products in the China, basically all those nightmares that companies making a strategic decision to enter China might be really, really worried about right now?
Listen, anything's possible. Do I think it's probable? No. There's just too much at stake for both economies. I think cooler heads in the U.S. will prevail. in terms of, where business and government meet. I also think that, China knows that their path to future growth is going to be through consumption and services. If you were to cut off some significant access to foreign goods and services, that's only going to damage the consumption numbers and growth in China itself. I think both sides just have too much to lose from trade to allow that to happen. Could consumer sentiment sour on certain brands? Yeah, we've seen that over the course of the last 25 years in China, where one particular brand may step in a difficult situation they have to get out of, and Chinese consumers can sour on them temporarily. But again, history shows us those are usually temporary flare-ups rather than long-term across the board boycotts or issues or avoidance.
That's beautiful. So let's talk about China right now, post-COVID-19. What has changed in the past half a year when you look at the consumers? What do you see happening in the market that has accelerated or really changed compared to the times before COVID?
Yeah, so, I think COVID has been across the board the great accelerator. Whatever was trending or moving fairly quickly in China and the US and the rest of the world in digital commerce or consumption has simply been sped up. So I think first we'd start with, live streaming was starting to come into its own in China. And it went from an effective but not often or always used tool to almost like the price of admittance. I think live streaming's gone from a luxury to a must-have, no matter who you are or what you're selling. And especially, in terms of what we've seen in China is kind of this quote unquote stay-at-home culture, where people are spending more time indoors. They're not spending as much time in stores and browsing and touching and feeling, which has led to, an increased reliance and trust on live streaming for somebody else to touch and feel and recommend the products for them. So I think, the live streaming, number one. Number two, I think it's just boosted the already high numbers of at-home delivery for grocery, for food and beverage, again, where you've seen, restaurants either not being open or not frequented as often as they have. And so delivery apps and delivery of all sorts has just become huge. I mean, it was big already, but those are two trends definitely we're seeing is, kind of that stay-at-home culture affecting everything else, the way people shop, where they want to shop, a higher reliance on technology, and the already high frequency of digital purchases is only increased.
Beautiful. And when we look at the China market right now, obviously e-commerce is recovering rather quickly, and we've seen an uptake in e-commerce, in fact, purchases year on year, given that the retail is still below last year numbers. So when you look at Alibaba, Jingdong or Pinduoduo, these are the three biggest players in the market right now when it comes to e-commerce. What is your favorite platform and why? How would you actually rank them on a scale from 0 to 10 with your confidence, with your kind of recommendation? What is your, maybe a few platforms that you would recommend to different industries for different purposes, but that would be really valuable to understand expert opinion.
Well, like you said, Ashley, those are the big three. And so in my position of working with brands and retailers from around the world, I don't necessarily look at it as having a favorite. I look at, who are the right platforms per particular brand or product or category. In some ways they're like, that's like asking me which of my three kids I love the most. Even if I do have one favorite, I'm never going to say it out loud.
It will be a secret.
That's going to be a secret. But, you start with, obviously, Alibaba is the biggest, baddest in town, right? And they have created the most robust new retail ecosystem. without a doubt. So when we talk about the new retail being the complete integration of online, offline technology, logistics, and media, nobody's really even a close second to Alibaba on that, not just in China, but in the world. And so the opportunities to engage with Alibaba are numerous, whether you're looking at Tmall or Tmall Global or Fresh Hippo grocery stores or placement in time department stores or 1919 wine shops. I mean, just, the Alibaba universe of habitats, right? If we think about Alibaba having an ecosystem and then habitats, and some are online, some are offline. They're probably the biggest and most important in the market. And the only thing I see for them is continued growth, continued innovation, continued acquisitions, further commitment to the integration of physical. And so if you're an international brand or retailer and you're looking for scale, obviously you're looking at Tmall. JD.
What industries, I'm sorry to interrupt,
sure.
What industries for Alibaba are an absolute kind of star, absolute must be on this platform?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is, even through trade wars, COVID, and, 5, 6, 8 years of evolution of the Chinese consumer, the top categories have remained pretty consistent. So anything to do with health and wellness, vitamin supplements, is right there in the top 5. Body care, beauty and cosmetics is right there in the big time. Apparel, athleisure, performance wear is up there. Mother and baby. And so you've pretty consistent. We've been pretty consistent with, what the hot categories are. I mean, that doesn't mean the others aren't playing. They are, of course. Yeah. Now look, those are the big time categories. That the problem with that is those are also very crowded spaces. Those aren't blue ocean opportunities anymore. And so you have to be particularly clever and dedicated with your marketing, both on the platform and outside the platform, to make those work for you. When we look at JD, they're kind of like the comeback kid. What a turnaround they've made over the last 2 years. They've traditionally been the number 2 in the market. They had a couple of rough years, but they've really turned their business around. And, it's important for the audience to understand that, the big difference between them and Alibaba is 80% of what JD does is they're the direct retailer, whereby you're selling your inventory to JD and they're vertically integrated to sell it through. They certainly have their marketplace and their international cross-border marketplace, JD Worldwide, but that's more of a wholesale to retail play. And then if JD is the comeback kid, Pinduoduo is, kind of the rookie of the year. What an amazing growth story there. A company that's, 5 years old or so, actually, maybe a little bit more, but to, very quickly attract 650 million users. And what's unique about them is, in my opinion, they were the first native born and bred social commerce company. And that's what really sets them apart, was they were not trying to add social commerce bolted onto what they already have. That's what they were born to do. And so they're famous for their group buying model, whereby you get a group of friends or relatives or both together, and you pick a product, and the more of you who actually buy that product, the price goes down. And so it's a really highly engaged social peer-to-peer. It makes shopping fun. It makes it an adventure. So the company to keep an eye on, the up-and-comer, is Pinduoduo. I mean, I love what they're doing. They've been innovative in connecting farmers and bringing agriculture directly, from farm to table. That's something they've also done incredibly well. And so Pinduoduo has really, made a great name for themselves. One side note is, the other one we would have talked about a year ago is Kaola. who again, there's a company 4 years old, who went
But it got
from
acquired.
5 years. Yeah, but they got acquired by Alibaba. So, they went from a NetEase side project to, 24% of cross-border e-commerce sales, and they were acquired by Alibaba for $2 billion. So what you end up having as a brand or a retailer is you have this rich landscape of platforms, of technology, of tools that we just don't see in the West. And when you think about it, a good way to look at an analogy is Chinese internet, digital retail, commerce companies and consumers are operating at like a graduate school level of performance, and most of the people and the companies and the consumers in the West are still operating at a high school level.
That's very interesting. Talking about JD, so right now, after hearing your introduction to the platform, a lot of people are interested. So why is it a big comeback story? What did JD do wrong 2 years ago, and how did they come back?
I think that they became a little too reliant on what had made them big in the first place. Really kind of just staying with that wholesale to retail model. I don't think they were investing as deeply in physical retail as Alibaba was. So they very quickly made a pivot to catch up and really start connecting physical and digital more robustly. Frankly, also they had a management problem. So at the very top, they had an overseas issue to deal with the CEO. That became a problem, but it wasn't just there. They also really had to change management, and they restructured the company. I think they just gotten a little bit bloated and a little bit top heavy, and they reset the management structure and simply by looking at how they operate the company from a human resources point of view. And then finally, they just, they got more in rhythm with what the consumer wanted and was seeking. So I think that management reset, a restructuring of the company, investing more in technology and physical has really produced amazing results for them.
Absolutely. And right now they're going through a couple of interesting partnerships. One of the most talked about is the one with Kuaishou. So they're basically going to be integrating these videos and live streaming on a big platform, that wants to acquire more users in higher tier cities. And JD knowingly wants to acquire more users in lower tier cities, right? So this is a beautiful synergy, and their partnership is truly working out very, very well, and the timing couldn't probably be better. If we're talking about a luxury product, and we have Tmall, we have JD, which of the two would you recommend and why?
Well, listen, Tmall was kind of the first to really set up a luxury specific infrastructure. So the luxury pavilion at Tmall was first to market. And again, talk about a brilliant move. Just luxury companies traditionally have been reluctant to do anything digital, not just in China. In the West, they were kind of last to the table, in some ways still are lagging behind everybody else in terms of participation with digital commerce, and with legitimate reason, price integrity, exclusivity, service, so much of the luxury value proposition is based on things you can't, or at least until recently couldn't, reproduce online. And Alibaba came to the table and said, we're actually going to do that. So we're going to set up the luxury pavilion. It's going to be an exclusive gated habitat. You're not going to be next to mass market products. You're walking into the equivalent of a luxury mall, right? A Plaza 66 in China or a Short Hills Mall in New Jersey. So really creating that single luxury atmosphere. They also don't allow just anybody to come in and shop. So they actually have a gating system for who can shop in that environment. And so this was brilliant in that it made the luxury companies feel like that exclusivity and that service level and that gated community sort of concept for luxury shopping was recreated in a digital format. And I think that's been the key. And I think they now have 160 or so luxury brands in the luxury pavilion. And then, so, you know, JD followed suit and set up their own luxury section and community. But what's amazing, you know, when I look at the two of them is, you know, by far, luxury companies are most engaged digitally in China. They're still catching up in the rest of the world because, frankly, nobody in the West has provided them that kind of safe space for them to do business digitally. I mean, they're catching up a little bit, you know, through their own domains and .coms and stuff. But, you know, Alibaba got it right again.
That's right. That's right. And JD provides, probably on the plus side, JD provides what they call this white glove service, right? When you can actually go and also shop luxury, but then you can send it as a gift to your friend or to your loved one. And the delivery is done in a very fancy kind of form when the tall gentleman, usually sometimes a lady, shows up and delivers you the product, you know, wearing the white gloves and essentially with a card and whatever, which is very interesting, I would say, way to do that. Going back to Pinduoduo, we all know that this is a, you know, beautiful story. Company's 5 years old, they are super understaffed, and yet they're growing like crazy, like on steroids. I think the founder of Pinduoduo is by now China's richest man or second richest man. I don't know. Every week it sort of drops. Either he's number one or he's number two or number three or number one or number two. But a lot of people are a little bit confused when it comes to Pinduoduo because international companies cannot really sell their products on Pinduoduo cross-border. So they need to be on the market in China and they need to provide a lot of discounts. So the whole platform itself is built over, yes, social e-commerce, recommendation, word of mouth and all that, and the community, but at the same time, heavy discounting, as you said yourself. Do you believe that in its state and shape as it is right now, Pinduoduo is a viable option for some international businesses within China borders, or it's not?
Yeah, I think right now it's a fairly select group of international companies who, as you said, are already doing business on the ground there. So if you're in a mass market business, you know, you can successfully move some inventory into that format. And you know, again, it has to be highly discounted, but I think of it in a way almost like it's a little bit like Costco in the US. You know, Costco, you know, in the warehouse style, you know, their corporate ethos is we will never make more than 10% margin on anything they sell. So, you know, they're getting deals from Coke and Pepsi and Frito-Lay and all these companies, you know, these super high volume, low cost buys from the mass market manufacturers. And then they take a minimal margin and it saves the consumer money. So that's the best analogy I could come up with where how a mass market international brand could play Pinduoduo in China. Now, that being said, I do understand that Pinduoduo is looking to expand on who they are and what they offer and what they do. And I've maintained, you know, for a couple of years now, I really started tracking them about 2.5 years ago. And, you know, I've maintained the position that for them to, you know, be a company that's going to be around for 40 years or 50 years, that they can't be a quote unquote one trick pony. That, you know, this business model that they offer is amazing. It's successful. It works. But, you know, they need to expand into other categories, other types of shopping, perhaps expand their universe of offerings and products and price levels. So right now it's a very, very limited play for foreign brands, with some exceptions, but certainly one we keep an eye on for, you know, changes and opportunity to further engage.
Are you optimistic about Pinduoduo's future? Because I know
Yeah.
a couple of, a couple of people out there, China watchers as well, and they basically say both local and foreign, and they say, yeah, Pinduoduo's success is kind of luck in coffee. It's gonna grow, 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 and then it's totally gone because it's not a viable business model. So, do you believe in the future of this platform?
I do. Yeah, I do very much. And boy, I think a luck and coffee comparison is a little unfair and over the top. I mean, Luckin, it was almost like you could look at them from day one and see that it was more of a Ponzi scheme than a play. Some of the funniest jokes I've heard over the last few years were people who were writing about that Luckin was going to threaten Starbucks in China. I mean, you just looked at their fundamentals from day one and could see where that was going. I think Pinduoduo, like I said, had a truly unique approach to market and technology. I'm bullish on them if they continue to expand into new habitats and expand their ecosystem and expand it to different business models and are able to open up their platform to different price levels. So my bullishness is based on I'm betting on the fact that the company is smart enough to evolve and add on. Now the downside is if they kind of stay static, it's like any other company.
Yeah.
and especially in a market, in a world where change is measured in months, if you're not evolving, you're not going to have a really bright future.
Absolutely. What is your advice? Because you are working with a lot of international companies that are revising their strategy, that are building their strategy for China also for the first time. What would be your advice for those that are right now looking to enter China? What shall they do? What are some of the tips? What are some of the steps that they shall be looking at?
Well, first and foremost, strategy before structure. Far too many companies tend to want to put the structure before they have the strategy. Let's go and get a TP first, then figure out what our China strategy is. Let's decide we're going to sell on Tmall before we decide that's actually the right place for us to be selling. And so, having been working with brands and retailers in China for 18 years now, I can tell you still the leading cause of death for brands in China is putting structure before strategy. And so then what is getting the strategy right means? It means taking the time and the resources to do all of your due diligence and to do a thorough research initiative to develop the actual strategy. And that research should be based on qualitative data, quantitative data across 10 to 12 categories, and then a thorough consumer research initiative as a part of that as well. So start with the research, let the research and the experts, I look at it as a three-legged stool. So with the brands that I'm entering into the market, we tell them you need to do the quantitative, the quantitative, and rely on 18 years of experience in our group doing this. And somewhere, when you have those three in place, you're probably going to come out with the right strategy. That's number one. Number two, as a part of that, make sure you're putting the core four, language, culture, history, and philosophy at the center of that. If you want to unlock consumer decision-making, and if you want to unlock the consumer journey, you need to understand the four, how engines for the Chinese brain: history, language, culture, and philosophy. So I would say that as a brand is where you want to start, and you've just increased your odds of succeeding by 80%. And then number two, make sure you choose your partners and your service providers carefully. I think you had Josh on a couple of weeks ago, and Josh, where I agree with him, is, he always emphasizes that there will be people in China who will promise you things that are unrealistic. we'll get you on fast. It'll be easy. You'll be making money in the first 6 months, and everything's turnkey, and it's not. It's hard.
Josh Gardner always says, whatever can go wrong in China will go wrong in China. And I think all three of us being friends will all sign under that.
Yeah. And then, how many, hopefully people hearing this will say, okay, look at these three people who all believe that, go into it with a realistic point of view, that it is hard. It's time consuming. It can be painful. It can be expensive up front. And you have to ask yourself, am I ready to do that for the potential payoff a year or 2 years down the line? So, kind of this mindset of understanding everything in China is possible, but nothing is easy.
Yeah.
Kind of the mantra for a long time. So I think that's part of it. And then finally, like I said, getting the right partners in place who are bringing a realistic point of view, like we're just discussing, on what needs to be done. And then finally, number 3, it's all about the marketing. China 10 years ago stopped being the place where if you build it, they will come, right?
Yeah.
So for that first 15 or 20 years of foreign brands and retailers going to China, you really could build it and they would come, because it was so sparse, so empty, and people were so desirous of foreign brands and products. You almost had to actively try to screw it up. And
some brands managed to do that,
and some brands still manage to. But today it's all about marketing. It's all about data science. It's all about using technology and data, and the platforms and the tools that combine them to be successful, right? So how do you drive traffic? How do you drive conversion? And so if you're a brand, you have to realize roughly 50% of your yearly marketing is going to be spent inside the marketplaces you're selling on, whether Tmall or JD, and about 50% needs to be spent outside, so on social media and KOLs and live streaming that's not inside the marketplace, etc. And so have a realistic view that you're going to make a very significant marketing spend in the first year to year and a half before you can pull back a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you just now mentioned that history, language, culture, and philosophy are the core. Because at the end of the day, when we do marketing, when we introduce a new product into the market, we tell stories, and we need to understand, of course, on the one hand, what is the consumer need, what is the journey, what are our unique selling points, etc. But at the same time, we need to tell the right story, right? And telling that story the right way needs exactly this: history, language, culture, philosophy. So very brief, in 5 minutes, how would you tell us China's history, language, culture, philosophy? What do all of us in 5 minutes need to absolutely understand about the China market from these 4 aspects?
I think that there's just this amazing continuity and consistency of those 4 items across centuries and actually across millennia. So if we take kind of the philosophy one first, right? So much of the mindset, both the individual and the collective in China, is driven by 3,000 years of influence of Confucianism, Buddhism, Taoism, and Maoism, right? And you could even argue lately Shiism.
Shiism.
Right? That's my new one. So, but that's very true. So you need to understand that how society is organized is based on Confucianism, and the relation with the universe and nature is Taoism, and the connection with the spiritual Buddhism, and the connection to China finally becoming an independent, powerful country is traced back to Maoism, and China's current state. And for most millennials and Gen Zers, all they've ever known is some form of the current state. So right there, that is something that is so consistent that when you're doing your checklist of what not to do, and what to do, you better be checking against those four mindsets. That's number one. So you could really screw up your storytelling if you don't get that, life is organized according to those 4 or 5 philosophical principles.
Ideologies,
right?
yeah.
The ideologies. In terms of history, again, very much the same thing, which is we tend to have very short memories in the West, especially these days where forget the 24-hour news cycle, you have 2-hour news cycles. I mean, somebody screws up on Twitter and, within 2 hours, they've issued the apology, they've deleted their account, and we go on to the next scandal, right? Very different than in China, where what happened, and this sounds very cliche, but it's still true. What happened 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago is still in the collective consciousness. So, as well as current events, right? So even as something as simple as, one of the luxury brands printed a t-shirt that showed, China and Hong Kong as separate countries, and that caused a big kerfluffle. And they had to kind of walk that back. Language, my goodness. What are we talking about? Over 30,000 Chinese characters, and the misplacement of one or two of them in your name, in your tagline, in your product descriptions, can really screw you up. And in fact, as you know far more about this than I do, getting a Chinese name isn't about translating your current name. It's what is a name that in the consumer's mind is completely associated with the product. So you could be selling a product that might be a lamp, but the right name for it in Chinese might be mountain shade, because the sound, the rhyming, and the association of, beautiful sunset on a mountain is a better name for your lamp than the widget lamp, right?
Yeah.
So again, and then hopefully that gives people a sense of how much thinking you have to do, perhaps more than other markets where translations can work, because let's face it, at the end of the day, in the West we kind of have this shared Newtonian linear and beginning, middle, end cycle philosophy, right? Whereas in China, in the East, it's much more of a circular Taoist approach to life in the universe, and things are cyclical and they don't have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So even starting at that most basic level, if you don't get that, or if you're not surrounding yourself with people who get that, you've just made your job harder, and you might not even get the name of your product right.
Absolutely. Very insightful. And finally, for 2020, what would be your advice to business people looking into China? We still have half a year to go. And what are your words of wisdom to them? The
consumer recovery in China is continuing at a good rate. And again, I guess the only thing I can really say is, don't think about the next 6 months. Think about what you're going to do in the next 6 months as it relates to what you're going to do there in the next 6 years. It's still an amazing opportunity for brands and retailers in a world where, Europe is tough, been largely anemic from a growth point of view for quite some time. I think the US is, we're going to come out of COVID and we're going to bounce back. But right now, looking at China, looking at Southeast Asia, the kind of the China sphere of influence from a consumer and brand point of view, that's where the growth is. And despite what's happened in 2020, financial, economic, and consumer growth is still tilting east. And so I'd say, if you're in China today, this is a great time to rapidly adjust what you're doing, based on what's accelerated there. And if you're not there yet, this is really the right time to do it. You have a smoother, in some ways, ironically, you have a quicker, smoother path to do so, because the rules, the regulations, the laws, cross-border e-commerce, and easing of the review process by Tmall and JD have really smoothed the path for companies to get in there pretty quickly now. Not easily, but quickly.
And as I love saying, China will never be cheaper. A lot of people are also looking at the investment you need to make into China and saying, oh my God, this is really expensive. Well, China is only going to get more expensive because there's so much competition. There's so much opportunity. Bloggers want more money. Platforms are going to be, again, more expensive advertising, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. To set up, to enter, to make a blast in that market, to make that entrance, you will have to invest more. So China was the cheapest yesterday. Today it is cheaper than tomorrow. And the best time is obviously right now. Plus, post-COVID-19, as we just now discussed, a lot of realities have changed. And as these realities and consumer sentiment have changed, it's a great opportunity to actually come in and, inject yourself into this new consumer journey. Be a part of that discussion, yeah? You don't need to come and reevaluate and change. You come already prepared with what the new realities of this new normal for Chinese consumers in fact are. Michael, thank you so much. It was so super insightful as always. Full disclosure, guys, me and Michael are working very closely together for the past many years. We have co-authored a book together. If you have not read it yet, it's called New Retail, Born in China, Going Global. Definitely check it out. It's available on Amazon. And guys, stay tuned for more China experts to come.